The first time I saw the Porsche 911 Carrera S, I was 19, exhausted, and eating stale vending machine pretzels in the warehouse break room. The screen on my cracked phone flickered as I scrolled through photos, sleek curves, red brake calipers, that unmistakable silhouette. It looked like everything I'd never had: control, success, freedom. I told myself right then, one day, I'm going to own that car. Even if it took me my entire damn life. And it almost did. For the next 10 years, I turned my life into a checklist of sacrifices. No vacations. No impulse buys. No nights out where I'd wake up regretting the tab. Every bonus, every tax refund, every scrap of overtime pay went into an account I called someday. Meanwhile, my brother Michael was living like the protagonist of some half-baked reality show. My parents bought him a brand new Chevrolet SUV when he flunked out of college the first time, so he could get back on his feet. They funded his second attempt, too. And the third. Me? I was the responsible one. Which, in family speak, means you're on your own, but we expect you to applaud everyone else. I can still remember the exact way the showroom smelled the day I walked in: leather, fresh wax, and this undercurrent of quiet judgment. The salesman looked me up and down like he expected me to pull out a coupon for a test drive. Then I handed him a cashier's check for $300,000. His expression shifted so fast it was almost funny. 1 second, he was skeptical. The next, he was all handshakes and fake reverence, like I'd just bought the Sistine Chapel. Driving that Porsche off the lot was the closest thing to peace I've ever felt. The engine's low growl made my chest ache in the best possible way. It felt like every late night, every skipped meal, every hour I'd spent working when everyone else was relaxing, finally meant something. It took 2 weeks for my parents to try and take it from me. I came home from work one night and pulled the lawsuit out of my mailbox. The envelope was thick, my name typed in bold letters across the front. I opened it standing there in the porch light, my heart thumping so loud I thought I might pass out. It was a formal complaint. My parents were suing me for $150,000. They claimed I owed them reimbursement for child-rearing expenses, as if the act of raising me had been some sort of business loan accruing interest all these years. But that wasn't even the best part. They also wanted the court to force me to sign over the Porsche to Michael, because apparently he needed a reliable vehicle to expand his professional opportunities. Never mind that his professional opportunities consisted of driving to overpriced bars and posting motivational quotes he didn't write. I stood there with that envelope in my hands, feeling the kind of hollow calm that only comes when you realize you were an idiot to expect anything better. This wasn't about money. It never was. It was about punishing me for being independent. About reminding me that no matter how hard I worked, they'd always think they had the right to take whatever I built. And for the first time in my life, I was done letting them. 3 days after the lawsuit landed on my doorstep, my phone started lighting up with Dad's name. The first time, I ignored it. The second, too. By the third, I picked up, not because I wanted to talk, but because part of me was curious how he justified suing me over a car. He didn't waste time pretending this was a normal call. "Dexter," he barked, his voice already carrying that sharp edge he used whenever he felt disrespected. "We need to get this resolved. This has gone far enough." I pressed my lips together to keep from laughing. "You're the one who served me court papers, but sure, I'm the problem. It's not about the lawsuit," he snapped, like he could hear the sarcasm in my voice and it offended him. "It's about you refusing to do the right thing. Michael needs that car." I looked out the window at my Porsche parked in the drive. Sunlight glinted off the hood. 10 years of work, of discipline, of saying no to every impulse so I could finally say yes to something I actually wanted. And here he was, acting like I'd stolen it from them. "Michael already has a brand new Chevy SUV," I said, my voice tight. "I've seen the photos. He's not exactly roughing it." My father scoffed, this dismissive huff I'd heard too many times. "You don't understand. He's trying to build a business. He needs to look successful. That Porsche would show people he's serious." "Dad, you mean it would show people that you're serious? That you can bankroll your golden child's next vanity project?" Silence crackled on the line. I leaned back in my chair, feeling something between anger and a dark kind of amusement. You've never asked me what it took to buy that car. How many weekends I worked. How many times I skipped meals to make the payments on time. You never cared. And now you expect me to hand it over like it's a spare hoodie. That's enough. He snapped. This isn't about your feelings. This is about family responsibility. You wouldn't have gotten where you are without the foundation your mother and I gave you. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. You mean the foundation where you told me to pay rent at 16 and cover my own groceries? That foundation? I heard his breathing get heavier. You're ungrateful, he said finally, voice low with fury. We did everything for you. And now you're going to let your brother fail because you want to play big shot? I swallowed, feeling something old and heavy start to lift off my shoulders. I was so tired of feeling like every step forward had to be negotiated, justified, explained. I'm not giving Michael the car, I said. My voice came out calmer than I felt. You can threaten me all you want, but this ends with you accepting that I don't owe you everything I've worked for. Dad's tone dropped, cold and deliberate. You're making a huge mistake, Dexter. You will regret this. One day, you'll look back and realize you destroyed your family over a car. I closed my eyes for a moment. I'd been waiting my whole life for their approval. But standing there, listening to him spit that threat, I felt something strange. Relief. Maybe, I said quietly. Or maybe I'll finally know what it feels like to keep something for myself. I ended the call before he could reply. I set my phone on the counter and walked out to the Porsche. My hand trembled a little as I rested it on the roof. It was stupid, just metal and leather and speed. But it was the first thing in my life that was truly mine. And I wasn't about to let them take it. After the call with Dad, I spent the rest of the evening pacing around my apartment, reading the lawsuit over and over. The words never changed, but somehow they kept getting heavier, like the page itself was soaking up all the dread I was trying to suppress. By midnight, I was too wired to sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, the Porsche keys in front of me like a dare. Part of me kept thinking I should just give up, hand over the car, avoid the spectacle. But another part, the part that had carried me through a decade of scraping by, kept whispering that I was allowed to have something of my own. In the morning, I called Brian. He was the last person I expected to confide in, but desperation makes you rethink your options. Brian was a colleague at work, one of those guys who wore khakis every day and had a dry sense of humor that people either loved or didn't understand. He was also a former lawyer, though you'd never know it unless you'd heard him dismantle corporate policies in the break room for fun. When I explained everything, my parents suing me, demanding I give Michael the Porsche, Brian didn't interrupt. He just let out this long, low whistle when I finished. Wow, he said finally. That's impressive. Impressive? I rubbed my eyes. You mean deranged? He snorted. That too. I waited, hoping he'd tell me this was all some kind of legal misunderstanding. That maybe there was a form I could sign to make it all go away. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. I'll be honest with you, man. This is complete garbage. I've seen petty family disputes, but this one deserves its own Netflix documentary. A laugh sputtered out of me before I could stop it. The absurdity of the whole thing was starting to feel like a bad parody. But, he continued, his tone sobering, just because it's nonsense doesn't mean it won't be messy. They can file whatever they want. The court has to take it seriously enough to process it. You'll probably have to show up. Respond in writing. Maybe even attend a hearing or two. I felt my stomach sink. How long does this kind of thing drag on? Depends. Sometimes the judge throws it out immediately. Sometimes it turns into a slow-motion train wreck. He paused, studying me. But you've got one thing working for you. They don't have a case. There's no law in the state, or any state I know of, that requires an adult child to repay their parents for raising them. So it's just harassment? Pretty much. Brian tilted his head. I'd bet money this is about Michael. Your parents want to humiliate you enough that you cave and sign over the car. I rubbed my hands over my face, trying to get rid of the pulsing headache at my temples. You think I should hire a lawyer? He shrugged. You could. But I've seen you work, Dexter. You're organized, detail-oriented, and stubborn as hell. If you want to represent yourself, you can. You'll need to be methodical. Keep every receipt, every email, every text. Build a timeline. Show the judge exactly where your money came from. A flicker of hope lit up in my chest, thin but real. You really think I can beat them? Brian grinned, the corners of his mouth twitching. Oh, you'll beat them. The only question is whether you want to do it quietly or make it the courtroom equivalent of a public execution. I laughed, and for the first time since the envelope arrived, I felt something other than fear. Resolve. Maybe they'd underestimated me. Maybe everyone had. After that talk with Brian, something shifted in me. I'd spent so many years feeling like I owed my family an explanation for every choice. Like I had to justify every step I took without their approval. But sitting in that fluorescent-lit break room, listening to Brian call their lawsuit what it really was, a cheap attempt to shame me, I realized I didn't have to keep defending myself. I just had to prove the truth. So that night I started digging. I pulled out an old cardboard box I hadn't touched since the day I moved into this apartment. Inside were 10 years of pay stubs, bank statements, and receipts, everything I'd kept in case life came knocking with some new disaster. It felt almost ridiculous, how meticulous I'd been about saving every piece of paper. But as I laid it all out across my kitchen table, it didn't feel paranoid anymore. It felt like a lifeline. Every line on those documents was proof. The overtime bonuses I banked instead of spending. The months I'd eaten canned soup because I couldn't spare an extra $100. The year I worked 2 jobs so I could pay off the Civic before it died for good. I stayed up until 2 in the morning sorting everything into folders. Rent receipts. Tuition payments. Grocery bills. Every shred of evidence that no one had ever handed me a damn thing. It was exhausting. But for the first time, it felt like I was taking back control, like I was finally drawing a line they couldn't cross. The next day, I decided to find out who was really pulling the strings. I'd suspected Michael was behind it. He'd always been the first to whine when he didn't get what he wanted. But when I called my cousin Nora to ask if she'd heard anything, she hesitated. I'm not supposed to get involved, she said, voice low. Please, I told her. Just tell me if this was all Michael, or if someone else is in on it. She sighed, and I heard her shuffle into another room before she whispered. It was Aunt Rita. My stomach clenched. Aunt Rita, the one who'd always looked at me like I was some charity case. She was the queen of backhanded compliments. The first to tell me Michael was going places, while I was just good with my hands. Apparently, she'd offered to help my parents handle the situation, which, in her language, meant funding the lawsuit out of her bottomless reserve of bitterness. She said you were getting too big for your britches, Nora said. That someone needed to put you back in your place. I pressed my hand over my eyes, feeling something hot crawl up my throat. It wasn't just the lawsuit. It was the years of quiet condescension finally boiling over. She really hates me that much? I asked. She hates that you made it without them, Nora whispered. That you didn't ask for help. That night, I sat in the dark with the folders spread across my living room floor, and for the first time since this started, I let myself feel all of it. The anger. The disbelief. The betrayal. I thought about all the nights I'd fallen asleep in my old car, telling myself it would be worth it someday. Someday had come. And so had the reckoning. I was done apologizing for working hard. Done pretending I didn't see exactly what they were trying to do. If they wanted a fight, they were going to get one. And I was going to make damn sure they regretted starting it. It started with a Facebook post. A grainy photo of my Porsche parked in front of my building, captioned in big, righteous letters. Some people forget where they came from. Michael's name was right there underneath it. At first, I thought it was pathetic. A grown man airing family drama on social media like a teenager with a bruised ego. But the comments started piling up within minutes, and it hit me that this wasn't just a petty dig. It was a strategy. He knew exactly how to play the victim. This is disgusting, one of his friends wrote. He owes everything to his parents. Entitled brat. Someone else chimed in. I should have ignored it. I tried. But then Michael posted another picture, this time, a close-up of the Porsche's badge, with a caption that made my blood go cold. Imagine suing your own family over a car when they raised you. That was the story he was selling, that I was the greedy one, the traitor, the ungrateful child who'd abandoned the people who gave me everything. My phone started buzzing nonstop. Texts from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. How could you do this to your parents? Your mother is heartbroken. Michael deserves better from you. Calls at every hour, blocked numbers, known numbers, numbers I'd deleted years ago but still recognized by the area codes. One voicemail after another. You're tearing this family apart. Your mother is sick over this. I hope that car was worth it. I silenced my phone and tossed it onto the couch. But it didn't stop. It felt like the walls were closing in, like no matter where I turned, someone was there to remind me I wasn't allowed to own anything without their permission. The part that hurt the most wasn't the strangers piling on. It was the people who should have known better. My aunt called me, voice syrupy sweet. Honey, just think about how Michael feels. He's your brother. I swallowed back the words I wanted to scream, that Michael was a 30-year-old man who never worked for anything he had. That I was the one who'd paid my own rent since I was a teenager while he got handed everything, and it still wasn't enough. Instead, I just hung up. The next morning, I woke up to a message request from some guy I didn't even know. Heard you're stealing from your own family. Hope you crashed that Porsche and learned some humility. I sat on the edge of my bed, the phone heavy in my hand. I felt this strange mixture of anger and exhaustion, like I was too tired to be outraged anymore. Because this was exactly what they wanted. They wanted me cornered. Shamed. Scared enough to give in. I went out to the kitchen, made a pot of coffee I didn't even taste, and tried to remind myself that the truth hadn't changed. I hadn't taken anything from them. I hadn't asked for anything either. Every dollar in my account, every mile on that Porsche, it was mine. Earned. But logic didn't make the harassment stop. By noon, my voicemail was full. My texts were coming in faster than I could delete them. I looked around my apartment, at the boxes of receipts, the folders of evidence, and realized I couldn't fight this by playing nice. If they were willing to humiliate me in public, I was willing to hit back in court. I picked up my phone, scrolled to Brian's number, and texted him. They've started a smear campaign. I'm done playing defense. Let's end this. A week after Michael's social media circus, I agreed to meet my parents in person. It wasn't because I thought they'd changed their minds. By then, I was past hoping for any sudden transformation. It was because Brian suggested it might be useful to hear them spell out their intentions in their own words. You never know, he'd said with that dry smirk of his. Sometimes people are so sure they're right that they confess to everything before they even see a judge. So I charged my phone, slipped it into my pocket with the recorder app running, and drove to their house. Walking up to the door, I felt like I was about to step onto a stage I'd never wanted a role in. Mom answered first. She looked smaller than I remembered. More tired. But when her eyes landed on me, they sharpened, and whatever softness I thought I saw vanished. Dexter, she said, voice tight. Come in. Dad was already at the dining table, a manila folder in front of him. He didn't stand when I walked in. Just motioned for me to sit across from him. I pulled out the chair, every muscle in my body tense. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Dad cleared his throat. This has gotten out of hand. You mean you suing me? I asked. You refusing to help your brother? He snapped. Mom put a hand on his arm, like she was trying to soften it. We didn't want this to be public, Dexter. But you left us no choice. I forced myself to meet her eyes. You filed the lawsuit. You went to court. You and Michael posted about it online. Don't pretend this is my doing. Her lips pressed into a thin line. If you'd agreed to sign the car over, none of this would have been necessary. I felt heat rise up my neck. Necessary? You think humiliating me was necessary? Dad leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. We did what we had to do. You have more than you need. Michael is trying to build something for himself. I looked between them, trying to decide if they genuinely believed this or if they were just that committed to the story they'd spun. That car is the only thing I've ever bought for myself, I said. My voice came out lower than I expected. You didn't help me earn it. You didn't even ask me how I managed to save up. You just assumed you were entitled to it. Dad's eyes narrowed. We're your parents. Everything you have started with us. There it was. The real reason? The belief that no matter how old I was or how hard I worked, they still had a claim to everything I built. Mom's voice went soft, coaxing. Dexter, listen to me. This lawsuit was a bluff. Dad finished for her. I went still. He didn't even look ashamed. You were supposed to be reasonable, he continued. To see how much this was hurting your mother. To make a deal before it went any further. And if I didn't? I asked, my throat dry. His mouth twitched in something close to a smile. Then we'd let the judge decide, knowing full well he'd likely dismiss it. But you'd be too tired to keep fighting. I stared at them, my heart hammering. So you knew this wouldn't hold up? Mom looked away. We hoped you'd do the right thing before it came to this. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my face neutral while my phone in my pocket kept recording every word. Every confession. Every ounce of manipulation. I pushed my chair back and stood. I think we're done here. Dad didn't move. You're still going to regret this. Maybe, I said. But at least I'll regret it on my own terms. I walked out without looking back. When I got home, I sent the recording to Brian. His reply came 10 minutes later. Perfect. They just handed you your defense on a silver platter. The morning of the hearing, I woke up before sunrise. I'd imagined this day 100 times, how it might feel to walk into a courthouse knowing my own parents were trying to strip me of something I'd earned. But reality felt weirder than I'd prepared for. Almost anticlimactic. I put on the only suit I owned. It was a little too big in the shoulders, a little too short in the sleeves. The same suit I'd worn to job interviews when I was 22 and desperate. It felt fitting somehow. Like a reminder of how far I'd come, and how far they were willing to drag me back if I let them. Brian met me out front, dressed in his usual khakis and a button-up that looked like he'd ironed it 5 minutes before he left the house. He wasn't acting as my lawyer, just as moral support, but the way he carried himself made me feel like I had a real team behind me. You ready? He asked. I nodded, even though I didn't feel ready at all. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Just a few rows of benches, a polished wooden table, a judge who looked like she'd seen it all. My parents sat on the other side, their attorney shuffling papers like he was trying to find a version of the story that wouldn't crumble on contact. Michael wasn't there. I don't know if that made it better or worse. When the judge called us forward, I felt my palms go slick with sweat. But I kept my voice steady as I started reading my statement. That I'd never borrowed money from my parents. That every dollar I used to buy the Porsche came from my own paychecks, my own sacrifices. That no adult child was legally obligated to reimburse their parents for raising them. The judge listened without interrupting. When I finished, she turned to my parents' lawyer. He launched into a speech about family expectations, about how my parents had supported me for 18 years and only wanted a fair share of what I'd achieved. But then he made the mistake of saying it was common practice to expect repayment. The judge raised an eyebrow. Counselor, can you cite any statute that supports that claim? He fumbled. Shuffled papers. Cleared his throat. No, Your Honor, he said finally. I pulled out the recording. My heart thumped so loud I felt dizzy. Your Honor, I said, I'd like to submit evidence, a recording of a conversation with the plaintiffs in which they admit this lawsuit was intended to pressure me into surrendering my vehicle under false pretenses. The judge gestured for the bailiff. The recording played over the speakers, my father's voice echoing through the room. It was a bluff. You were supposed to be reasonable. My mother's quiet agreement. The judge's expression didn't change much, but I saw the way her eyes flicked over to my parents. When the audio stopped, The silence was so heavy I could feel it pressing on my ribs. "Mrs. Carter," the judge said quietly, turning to my mother. "Is that your voice on this recording?" My mother stared down at the table. Her hands were clenched so tight her knuckles were white. "Yes," she whispered. "And do you confirm that your intention was to file this claim knowing it had no legal merit?" She nodded, still not looking up. "Yes." That single word felt like a door finally slamming shut. The judge didn't take long. She dismissed the case with prejudice, which meant they couldn't refile it. She also referred their lawyer to the Bar Association for potential ethical violations. I don't remember leaving the courtroom. Just that I ended up standing outside in the cold January air, my breath coming out in shaky clouds. Brian clapped me on the shoulder. "Told you," he said. "They never had a leg to stand on." I looked over at him, half expecting to feel triumphant. But all I felt was tired. So damn tired. Winning didn't feel like winning. It felt like stepping out of a burning house and realizing you'd saved yourself, but everything you thought you loved inside was already gone. For a couple of days after the hearing, I kept expecting someone to show up at my door. Maybe Mom, with her sad eyes and practiced tremble in her voice, or Dad, with that mix of disappointment and arrogance. But they didn't. Instead, they switched tactics. Aunt Rita started calling. She left voicemails that swung between pity and rage. "I hope you're happy, Dexter. You humiliated your family. Your mother hasn't stopped crying. This is what you wanted, isn't it? To feel powerful?" I blocked her number. Then Michael resurfaced, of course. He started a GoFundMe titled, "Help Michael Rebuild After Family Betrayal." The description claimed I'd stolen his future, and that he was in emotional distress over losing the Porsche he'd never actually owned. He included the same photo of the car he posted before, along with a picture of himself looking dramatically heartbroken in front of his Chevy SUV. It would have been funny if it hadn't been so pathetic. I sent the link to Brian, who nearly spit his coffee out laughing. "You realize this is fraud, right?" he said. "Yeah," I sighed. "I'm documenting everything." By then, I'd started to expect the worst from all of them. So it didn't surprise me when I caught Aunt Rita parked across the street from my apartment 2 nights later, sitting in her car with the headlights off. She must have thought I wouldn't notice. I did. I stood in my window and stared right at her until she finally pulled away. The next morning, I went down to the courthouse and filed for a restraining order. I attached all the voicemails, the screenshots, the fundraising campaign. When I handed the clerk the stack of evidence, she gave me a look I couldn't quite read. Sympathy, maybe? Or the weary recognition of someone who'd seen too many families rot from the inside out. That night, I sat on my couch, the Porsche keys on the table in front of me, and let myself feel the emptiness. It wasn't sadness exactly. It was the hollow space where obligation used to live. The place that used to whisper you owe them everything. I thought about the younger version of me, the kid who believed if he just worked hard enough, he'd finally earn their approval. And I felt sorry for him. Because he didn't know that some people will never respect you for building something on your own. They'll only resent you for proving you didn't need them. 2 weeks later, I packed a bag and drove out to my grandfather's cabin. He'd left it to me years ago, and I'd barely visited since he passed. The place was small, old, and a little drafty in the winter. But when I stepped inside, it felt more like home than any place my parents had ever lived. I brought my dog, Bean, a lumpy, short-legged mutt with an underbite that made him look permanently offended. He immediately claimed the recliner by the fireplace and started snoring so loudly I thought the windows might rattle. Sitting there with Bean, watching the snow drift down, I realized I was finally, completely free. No more threats. No more guilt. Just me, the dog, and the knowledge that I'd survived the worst of it. I didn't know what came next. Maybe I'd keep working. Maybe I'd sell the Porsche eventually and buy something simpler. Maybe I'd stay at the cabin a little longer than I'd planned. But whatever I did, it would be my choice. And no one, especially not the people who tried so hard to break me, would ever take that away again.